Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I'm Arjun Chaudhary and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Ambrish Saxena.
नमस्कार। आर्थिक खबरों के कार्यक्रम मार्केट मंत्र में आपका स्वागत है। आज के अंक में देश विदेश की आर्थिक गतिविधियों के साथ साथ शेयर बाजार की हलचल पर एक नजर डालेंगे और चर्चा करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं वरिष्ठ आर्थिक विशेषज्ञ पुनीत जैन। पुनीत, कार्यक्रम में आपका स्वागत है।
धन्यवाद अमरीश।
और पहले एक नजर आज की आर्थिक सुर्खियों पर अंग्रेजी में हेडलाइन के साथ मौजूद हैं अर्जुन चौधरी।
Domestic stock indices fall more than 0.5%. Sensex closes below the 60,000 level. Nifty settles below 17,900 mark. Gold climbs to trade at 55,375 rupees per 10 grams of February contracts at the MCX. And Brent crude remains almost constant at $78.52 per barrel.
घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में 0.5% से अधिक की गिरावट दर्ज की गई। सेंसेक्स 60,000 अंक और निफ्टी 17,900 अंक के नीचे बंद हुआ। सोने का मूल्य फरवरी के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के लिए 55,375 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम रहा और ब्रेंट क्रूड कच्चे तेल का मूल्य $78.52 प्रति बैरल पर स्थिर रहा। और आज की पहली खबर, सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी दोनों ही आज गिरावट के साथ बंद हुए। बंबई शेयर बाजार का संवेदी सूचकांक सेंसेक्स 60,000 अंकों के नीचे बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 17,875 अंकों के नीचे रहा। दुनिया के बाजारों से आ रहे मिले जुले संकेतों के बीच ये गिरावट दर्ज की गई। सेंसेक्स 452 अंक यानी 0.7% की गिरावट के साथ 59,900 अंकों पर बंद हुआ। निफ्टी 133 अंक यानी 0.7% गिरकर 17,859 अंकों पर आ गया। बंबई शेयर बाजार के व्यापक बाजार में मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप दोनों ही सूचकांकों में 0.7% की गिरावट दिखाई दी। सेंसेक्स में शामिल 5 कंपनियों में बढ़त जबकि 25 कंपनियों में गिरावट दर्ज की गई। महिंद्रा एंड महिंद्रा में सबसे अधिक बढ़त दिखाई दी, उसका शेयर 1.1% तक बढ़ा। रिलायंस के शेयर में 0.9% की तेजी दर्ज की गई। नेस्ले इंडिया का शेयर 0.6% बढ़ा। दूसरी ओर गिरावट दर्ज करने वाले शेयरों में टीसीएस का शेयर 3% और इंडस इंड बैंक का शेयर 2.8% गिरा। बजाज फिनसर्व का शेयर 2.6% और टेक महिंद्रा का शेयर 2.4% तक गिरा। बंबई शेयर बाजार में लगभग सभी क्षेत्रों में गिरावट देखी गई। एफएमसीजी क्षेत्र में कोई बदलाव नहीं दिखाई दिया। टेक क्षेत्र में गिरावट 1.9% की रही। आईटी सेक्टर में 1.8% की गिरावट दर्ज की गई जबकि धातु क्षेत्र में 1.3% की गिरावट दिखाई दी। बंबई शेयर बाजार में मोटे तौर पर नकारात्मक कारोबार रहा। कुल 1,424 कंपनियों ने अच्छा प्रदर्शन किया जबकि 2,084 कंपनियां गिरावट की शिकार हुई। 130 कंपनियों के शेयरों में कोई बदलाव नहीं हुआ।
Sensex and Nifty today witnessed losses. The index of the top 30 companies at the Bombay Stock Exchange, Sensex, ended below 60,000 points. Nifty, the index of top 50 companies at the National Stock Exchange, closed below the 17,900 level. Both the stock indices fell amid mixed global cues. Sensex fell by 452 points to settle at 59,900 points. Nifty also slipped by 133 points to finish at 17,859. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap and the small-cap indices both closed 0.7% down. In the Sensex pack, 5 companies posted gains while 25 logged losses. Mahindra & Mahindra was the top gainer as it rose 1.1%, followed by Reliance, which added 0.9%. Nestle India gained 0.6%. On the other hand, TCS declined by 3% and IndusInd Bank fell 2.8%. Bajaj Financial Services slipped 2.6% and Tech Mahindra ended 2.4% down. In sectoral indices at the BSE, all the sectors logged losses except the FMCG sector, which ended flat. The tech sector declined 1.9%, followed by IT sector, which slipped 1.8%. Metal sector fell by 1.3%. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was negative as shares of 1,424 companies gained, while 2,084 companies fell. Shares of 130 companies remain unchanged. And on this, we're joined by Puneet Jain, market expert. Puneet, once again, a warm welcome to you in Market Mantra.
Thank you, Arjun.
Puneet, even though the market fell by 453 points to close at 59,900 points, the market had fallen even lower to 59,670 points. So we see a pullback in late trade by almost 230 points. So how do you see the markets right now, with the DIIs being the net buyers and the FIIs being the net sellers?
So, Arjun, you're right. I mean, and in fact, this is a pattern we have been seeing in the market lately, where markets trade lower during the mid session, and then towards the end of the session, again, we see some kind of buying, and then they recover. This happened yesterday, and this happened today. Apparently, there is short selling during daytime, and towards close, that there is short covering, which shows that the selling pressure is there, but it doesn't sustain. However, this is more of a trading observation rather than long-term kind of a trend. My own sense is that the market is seeing some profit booking and selling pressure from HNIs and foreign institutional investors, whereas, of course, domestic institutions are still buyers. They have large liquid funds in their hands. They are seeing fresh inflows. Also, they had sold, in fact, last month, so they're sitting on liquidity. But if you really ask me, overall, I think markets are poised quite delicately, and investors are cautious. I don't think we are making big bets ahead of big events coming up in terms of the budget on 1st of February. Also on 1st of February, you have the next US Fed meeting. So 1st Feb is going to be quite an important date for the markets. I think markets are cautious right now. So I would say that we are kind of placed quite evenly at present.
To what extent is the market trend in India following what's happening with the US market? We saw the Nasdaq, the Dow Jones, and the S&P 500 fall by more than 1%. Do you see that as the reason why the markets fell today, even though there was a mixed bag of short selling and short covering, as you put it, towards the latter part of the trading session?
So, Arjun, interestingly, I don't think Indian markets are following the script written in US. So US markets are following their own trend. In fact, they're distinctly weak. So if you look at the Dow Jones, which went down by almost 12 to 13% last year, compared to that, and Nasdaq was down by more than 30% last year. Compared to that, the Nifty 50 index was up by 4% in 2022. So you can see that Indian markets are not following what is happening in USA. However, the broad trend of weakness across equity markets, I think that is affecting India. But the fall in India is much less than what is happening in global markets. In fact, India was the best performing major international market last year. This year, of course, there are concerns around valuations in India. Right now, the PE multiple for Nifty, 1 year forward on forward earnings basis, is about 19 times. Traditionally, we have had average is about 17 for last 10 years. And if you look at global markets, they are much lower in terms of PE multiples. So foreign investors are worried that Indian markets, while they are very attractive to them in the long term, I think short term they are all looking at it as a slightly overvalued market. And I think that is what is affecting our performance. But having said that, I think we will outperform other global markets, but right now the trend is somewhat weaker.
लेकिन पुनीत, अगर हम एशिया के बाजारों की बात करें तो मोटे तौर पे आज बढ़त का ही रुख रहा, खासतौर से चीन से जब ये खबर आई कि वो रीओपनिंग की सारी योजना बना रहा है, लेकिन उससे भी आपको क्या लगता है कि भारतीय बाजार पूरी तरह अछूते रहे?
हाँ, देखिए अमरीश, इनफैक्ट अगर हम चीन की बात करें तो वहां के बाजार तो बहुत गिरावट में रहे हैं पीछे, और थोड़ा रिबाउंड हुआ है रीओपनिंग के बाद। लेकिन उससे पहले मैं बताऊं आपको कि जो उनका मेन इंडेक्स है, अगर यूएस बेस्ड है, चाइना ड्रैगन इंडेक्स जिसे हम कहते हैं, वहां पर उसमें करीब करीब 40% की गिरावट आ चुकी थी। रिबाउंड हुआ है चाइना के मार्केट में, लेकिन अगर हम उसको कंपेयर करें पिछले 2 वर्षों में या 5 वर्षों में, तो आप देखेंगे कि चाइना के मार्केट्स में काफी डाउन ट्रेंड रहा है, वहां पर परफॉर्मेंस अच्छी नहीं रही। तो शॉर्ट टर्म में वहां पर डेफिनेटली कुछ रिबाउंड आ रहा है रीओपनिंग की वजह से, जो कि अच्छी चीज है। मुझे लगता है चाइना में रीओपनिंग होगा तो पूरा ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी को थोड़ा उसके बल मिलेगा, विच इज गुड फॉर द ग्लोबल मार्केट्स। लेकिन फिलहाल मैं चाइनीज मार्केट्स को बहुत ज्यादा वेटेज नहीं दे रहा हूं, क्योंकि वो फैक्टर्स बिल्कुल अलग हैं और उनका परफॉर्मेंस भी बहुत अलग रहा है। पर ताइवान, कोरिया, यहाँ पर आज अच्छी परफॉर्मेंस थी। ये मैं कहूंगा कि टेक्नोलॉजी के वजह से काफी पीछे वहां पर गिरावट आई थी, करेक्शन रहा था।
तो ऐसे टाइम पे आप पुनीत फिर रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स को क्या सलाह देंगे मार्केट को लेकर?
अमीश, देखिए मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा कि जो लोग बहुत लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रहे हैं उन्हें सिस्टमेटिक ढंग से आराम धीरे धीरे इन्वेस्ट करता रहना चाहिए। जो शॉर्ट टर्म ट्रेडर्स हैं, ऑल्दो ये मुश्किल है प्रेडिक्ट करना कि मार्केट कहाँ जाएगी शॉर्ट टर्म में, वो अभी थोड़ा सा कॉशियस अप्रोच ले सकते हैं। बहुत बड़ी इन्वेस्टमेंट ना करें, लमसम में इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं करनी चाहिए। मुझे लगता है अभी थोड़े दिन के लिए वो थोड़ा कॉशियस रहें, थोड़ी इन्वेस्टमेंट कर सकते हैं। पर अगर वो 2 या 3 वर्ष के लिए अपना इन्वेस्टमेंट करना चाहें तो बड़ी अच्छी इन्वेस्ट करते रहे वो आराम से। मुझे लगता है बहुत अच्छे रिटर्न रहेंगे 2 या 3 वर्षों में।
Puneet, we saw the IT index fall by 75 basis points to 17,859, the index maintained for IT companies, and we are expecting the third quarterly results for TCS on Monday, which is a bellwether stock. How do you see the IT index and their companies faring when trade commences next week?
So, Arjun, as you know, IT stocks worldwide are facing a very challenging environment as far as markets are concerned. In fact, the top IT companies and technology companies in USA, many of them have fallen by 50-60% from the peak. So, and in India, fortunately, we haven't seen that kind of a fall, but there is an underlying weakness in IT sector stocks for the past many months. My own sense is that for next 2-3 quarters, you will see a subdued sentiment in India. This buying will pick up only when IT sector stocks or NASDAQ picks up in USA. Only after that we could see aggressive buying in India. I think right now only value investors, long-term investors who are putting money in a steady stream and they are to hold for long term. I think for them IT sector stocks are attractive. But if you are hoping to make a short-term gain on IT, I think it looks difficult to me right now.
What is the FMCG story? Even though the index for FMCG companies was in the green, it went up by almost 11 points in today's trade. How do you see that sector performing with Dabur third quarterly results coming out?
So, Arjun, in fact, FMCG companies have been again facing a very difficult operating environment. What has happened is that the input prices in terms of commodities, they had gone up a lot, whereas output, they were not able to raise too much prices, first of all, because of more competition. Because in India, if you look at FMCG space now, there are a lot more big companies which have entered the FMCG sector. So that is one. There are a lot of local companies. In fact, I was talking to a company which is in distribution, and they told me that there are a lot of local brands and local FMCG companies which have come up in India, which is very good for the Indian economy, but not that good for large listed companies. So FMCG companies are operating in very challenging environment. I do not expect the margins to go up, and if you ask me, I think the future looks quite subdued and muted for FMCG companies on margin front as well as in terms of top line growth for FMCG companies.
What about new age companies like Paytm, Zomato, which are basically in the logistics business? How do you see their share valuations for investors right now? Because there's been a lot of speculative position earlier. The current prices are well below the IPO level.
So Arjun, as you know, that all these companies, so all the tech companies have been kind of a disappointment for investors. In fact, in some companies, investors have lost a lot of money. Companies you mentioned, and but at the same time, I can tell you with some confidence that we cannot put all these tech companies in one basket. In fact, some of these companies will do very well going forward because the business models are robust, the growth is there, and they're hoping to make profits sooner than later. There are many platform companies or technology companies which are not going to make money, and they're not attracting that kind of margins, and I don't think they're going to be that growth oriented. So I would say that whenever one is investing in these high tech platform companies, technology companies, you need to study the business model very carefully, and only in those companies where you think there is some kind of a special skills or the valuations are attractive or they're going to make profits in their future, I think you should invest. So my own advice to investors would be they should apply some time and mind to each company individually and then assess and then invest, and not as a basket of tech companies, I would say.
So the trend we have been seeing is that your DIIs have been counterbalancing the selling position of the FIIs. So when you see them coming back, we are reading reports about Jefferies that they're going to be overbought as far as India is concerned as compared to other emerging markets. But when are they going to start re-entering the market now that the new calendar year has begun?
So Arjun, you know very well that Indian domestic institutions have been playing this counterweight role to FIIs for quite some time now. In fact, whenever FIIs last year they were selling heavily, domestic institutions really held up the game, and because of large domestic inflows in mutual funds. So that is one pillar of strength for DIIs. They are sitting on liquidity right now, so they are supporting the market, and selling by FIIs is kind of neutralized to some extent. But my own sense is that FIIs will return to emerging markets, and particularly India, only after maybe a couple of quarters, because when interest rate scenario in USA stabilizes and the index stabilizes, only then FIIs will want to venture out and take higher risk. I think buying, true sustained buying by FIIs, I think that is still away for a couple of quarters.
What does Monday hold for the market next week, despite the counterweight that the DIIs are playing right now in the market?
So Arjun, I think now we have about 3 weeks left for the budget to be presented. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the US Fed meeting is also on the 1st of February. So I think markets will remain range bound. They will not go up a lot in a hurry. They will probably not fall too much. There will be some kind of a cautious approach by both domestic investors as well as institutions. So if you really ask me, I think we are going to see pretty narrow movement in the markets with low volatility for next 2 to 3 weeks.
What about the returns of mutual fund companies, since they are a substantial buying component in the DII space?
So, mutual funds, in fact, have been having a very good time because of the expansion of domestic investor base. And most of the investors are now investing in SIPs. SIP quantum has really gone up to about 13,000 to 14,000 crores a month, which is very steady, good flow of funds into the market. So I think mutual funds are going to are having a good time. They have very large assets under management. About 40 lakh crores is now the assets under management for mutual funds, which is so they make profits because as AUM goes up, their own fees goes up. That is one. Secondly, I think the markets are really held up by domestic investors. So to that extent, I think mutual funds are playing a positive role. They're going to see very good balance sheets, very good flows. In fact, if you see the last few days, listed companies in the insurance space and the asset management companies, they have been doing very well. In fact, the stocks have gone up in the last 2 weeks.
और चलते हैं एशिया के बाजारों का हाल जान लेते हैं। चीन की दोबारा खोलने की योजनाओं के बाद एशिया के बाजारों ने आज अच्छा प्रदर्शन किया। दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 1.1% और जापान का निक्केई 0.5% बढ़ा। चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स लगभग स्थिर रहा। दूसरी ओर सिंगापुर के स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स में 0.5% और हांगकांग के हैंगसेंग में 0.3% की गिरावट दर्ज की गई। दिन के कारोबार में यूरोप के शेयरों ने अच्छा प्रदर्शन किया। फ्रांस के कैक और लंदन के फुटजी में 0.3% की बढ़त दिखाई दी। जर्मनी का डेक्स लगभग स्थिर रहा।
Puneet, we are seeing that in the Chinese mainland markets, the market was either flat or it just witnessed minor gains. But on the macroeconomic level, there is data coming out that one-third of shipments to and fro from China to the US and back have fallen. What does that tell you about China and the reopening of the economy post-COVID or during COVID?
So, Arjun, one thing about China is that we find it very difficult to trust the data which is coming out. So we get all kinds of data out of China, and the trust factor is very low. Having said that, the GDP data that came out recently out of China, the growth was about 2%. They're expecting that GDP for China this year will be roughly about 3.5%. So, which is not very much, I think. So, China has a lot of challenge on its hands. And there are many, it's just not about reopening in terms of COVID. They have problems on the property sector front. They have problems on the technology sector companies. So I think China has a lot of work to do on the economy. And I hope they confront the world less and they engage more in terms of economic development. But I don't think that is changing in a hurry. So China, the data that we have, if I look at purely economic data, the GDP expectation, the growth of GDP expectation is about 3.5%. Not much, but I think what you're saying in terms of fall in shipments, it is all indicative of the fact that China's economy is slowing down quite significantly.
To what extent do you believe the offshore outsourcing has been displaced from China to India because of this COVID situation there and all of a sudden reopening the markets?
So, Arjun, while the sentiment is very positive, so everybody's talking about China plus one. And in terms of China plus one, what we have seen is that countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Myanmar, a lot of these countries that are around China, smaller countries, they have benefited a lot. Their factories have shifted. And India, of course, we are looking at very big companies coming to India, particularly in terms of electronics manufacturing. But Arjun, if you look at the data which is coming out, I don't think much of it is still happening. So we are talking about it a lot. So I would say that it will take 2 to 3 years for us to see a significant shift in supply chains from China to countries like India. But definitely there is a movement in that direction. We are seeing companies being set up. It usually takes 2 to 3 years to get manufacturing units set up and started. So I think it will happen. It will happen in 2-3 years. There is a lot of talk about it, but data is not suggesting that is happening on the ground right now.
Well, let's have a look at the U.S. stock market now. Wall Street's main stock indices closed more than 1% lower yesterday as fresh evidence of a tight labor market ate away at any hopes investors had that the Fed Reserve could pause its rate hiking cycle anytime soon as it keeps focused on inflation. The Nasdaq Composite Index fell 1.5% and the S&P 500 declined 1.2%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbled 1%. Puneet, how would you look at the Wall Street right now? They're also going through a turbulence. Even though the VIX is right now at 23, it's gone up marginally. But apart from the Fed, which is taking a very staunch stance on containing inflation through rate hikes, how do you see the economy actually recovering from what's happening there?
So, Arjun, as you can see, that U.S. markets and U.S. economy is behaving in a very different manner. Yesterday, the markets in USA went down because they came out with data which showed very good job growth. So if you get good economic news in USA, the markets go down, which is really funny because if you get good news and the markets take it badly, and probably a bad news will be welcomed by the market. So right now, of course, the entire market is focused on what the Fed is going to do. When are they going to let up on this interest rate hike cycle? And right now, I think the expectations are somewhat knocked down because it feels that Fed will continue to raise rates well into 23, probably hold rates at higher levels for quite some time, and that is why markets are disappointed. Having said that, the valuations in USA have become very attractive. In fact, many large technology companies, the PE multiples now are almost near single digits. In many established companies, I'm talking about the FANG stocks and the Apples and the Microsoft, the PE multiples are hardly 14, 15 times now. So I think valuation-wise, the US markets have become very attractive. We will see funds flowing into those stocks because they're substantially very profitable, strong companies. So right now, it is more the fear of Fed which is driving investors away. But sooner or later, it will be over. And I think they will all invest in value-based companies. So yes, the USA market is going to be still challenging for a few months. But somewhere in the middle of the year, I expect a turnaround in the sentiment when the Fed stops raising rates.
But the money market for treasuries has gone up, in fact, as much as 4.9% on 6-month treasuries. And then you have the US dollar index, which is firming up once again. It's at 106 almost after it fell to 104. What does that tell you about the US bond market and the currency? Briefly.
See, both these show that markets are expecting that Fed will continue to raise rates higher than earlier expected. So we had expected that they will stop raising rates either by December or the first quarter of 2023. But the markets are now saying that they expect the rates could be even higher towards the middle of the year or towards the end of the year. And what happened was that actually after September, October, because markets were expecting that Fed may pause, we saw that monetary conditions in US actually became quite easy. And there was more flowing money
right.
in the system. And that's why I think right now the markets are reacting to it and raising interest rates higher, that is the yields as well as the dollar index.
Coming back to the RBI bond story, the Reserve Bank has announced the indicative calendar for issuance of sovereign green bonds. Accordingly, 2 auctions will be conducted for an amount of 8,000 crore rupees each. The first auction will be held on the 25th of this month, while the second has been scheduled for the 9th of February. RBI has informed that 5% of the notified amount will be reserved for retail investors. Investors will have a choice to put in their money for either 5 years or 10 years. The bonds will also be eligible for trading in secondary markets. It may be recalled that the Union government had announced sovereign green bonds as part of its overall market borrowings in the budget 2022-23. The proceeds will be deployed in public sector projects which help in reducing the carbon intensity of the economy and for mobilizing resources for green infrastructure. And let's have a look at how the oil market has performed. Crude oil prices today remain almost constant. Brent crude was trading near $78.52 per barrel, while WTI crude prices were at $73.57 per barrel. Puneet, prices seem to be receding by these valuations, but do you see them holding at these levels, or do you see them go sideways, especially with Russia calling for a ceasefire with Ukraine?
So I'm with you on the second aspect. I think that they will really go sideways. They will move in a very narrow range. Right now, the demand supply is quite evenly balanced, and I don't think the prices are going to rise very sharply or fall very sharply. So yes, I think they will be in a narrow range for quite some time.
और चलते हैं कमोडिटी बाजार का हाल जान लेते हैं। फरवरी के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के लिए सोने के मूल्य में 85 रुपए की वृद्धि हुई। 10 ग्राम सोने का मूल्य 55,375 रुपए दर्ज किया गया। मार्च के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के लिए चांदी 417 रुपए बढ़कर 68,495 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम पर पहुंच गई। न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोने का मूल्य $1,841.70 प्रति औंस दर्ज किया गया। दिन के कारोबार में चांदी बढ़त के बाद $23.61 प्रति औंस पर पहुंच गई। पुनीत, सोने का जो मूल्य अभी चल रहा है, तो आप इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिहाज से क्या सलाह देंगे निवेशकों को?
देखिए, सोने में हमने काफी तेजी से अभी बढ़त देखी है हाल ही में। थोड़ा अभी स्टेबलाइज कर रहा है, लेकिन अगर आप मुझसे पूछें तो मुझे लगता है अभी सोने की कीमतों में और बढ़त हो सकती है आने वाले समय में। और एक अच्छा निवेश है, लेकिन सेफ्टी के लिए है। बहुत ज्यादा रिटर्न्स नहीं होता है, बट सेफ रिटर्न्स किसी को इन्वेस्टमेंट करना हो, उसके लिए गोल्ड और सिल्वर दोनों ही काफी अट्रैक्टिव है।
And what's the near-term view for silver? It's been going up steadily as compared to gold.
So, people who are very active in silver trading, they believe that silver has a lot more room to go up, and the ratio between gold and silver is going to improve in favor of silver. So the market expectation is that silver will go higher from the current levels.
और चलते हैं कार्यक्रम की समाप्ति की ओर। पुनीत, इस कार्यक्रम में भाग लेने और प्रमुख खबरों पर हमारे साथ चर्चा करने के लिए आपका धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद अमरीश।
And before we close, a reminder of the headlines. Domestic stock indices fall more than 0.5%. Sensex closes below the 60,000 level. Nifty settles below 17,900 mark. Gold climbs to trade at 55,375 rupees per 10 grams of February contracts at the MCX. And Brent crude oil remains almost constant at $78.52 per barrel. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. For now, goodbye.
Market Mantra. Market Mantra.